Spain's king calls for urgent international action to end the massacre in Gaza. Iran's president denounces the Israeli and U.S. strikes as a betrayal of diplomacy. And Ukrainian president warns that the world is facing the most destructive arms race in history. Eight p.m. here in Cairo, time for the news in full with Mihal Al-Hamalawi. Spain's King Felipe has called for urgent international action to end the massacre in Gaza during his address to the UN General Assembly. We cry out to implore and demand that this massacre stop now, he said, urging Israel to fully uphold international humanitarian law in Gaza and the West Bank. The king demanded a ceasefire, humanitarian access, and the release of all detainees. He also pushed for a two-state solution, citing Spain's recent recognition of Palestine as part of a wider UN push for lasting peace. Felipe added that this must help achieve a just and definitive regional peace. And now we move to a live broadcast from New York, where Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara is delivering a speech at the United Nations for the 80th General Assembly high-level debate.
Resistance to be a beacon for the world. Syria, however, for 60 years fell under a repressive rule that disregarded the value of the territory it ruled over. For long years, we've suffered injustice and deprivation and oppression. Then we rose in claiming our dignity. The previous regime has used the worst kind of torture against our people, chemical weapons and bombardment and torture in prison and displacement and sectarian strife, and used drugs against our people and the world. It has torn our country apart and brought forth fighters from around the world. The former regime killed around 1 million innocent people and displaced thousands and millions and demolished 2 million homes. Ladies and gentlemen, the unarmed people were attacked using chemical weapons. Our women and children have inhaled toxic gases, all this to silence truth. And with all this criminality, there was no language for solution. Despite the offers, this people had no means and choice but to organize itself and to organize militarily to oust a criminal regime. It was a military operation that was filled with mercy and good and that prioritized tolerance and that did not target civilians. It targeted justice without vengeance. We restored our right and we became victorious for sake of our grievances. We were victorious for the mothers of martyrs and for all of you, people of the world, for the future of our children and yours. And we paved the way for the return of refugees, and we destroyed the trafficking of drugs. Accordingly, Syria has transformed from an exporter of crisis to an opportunity for peace for Syria and the region. Ladies and gentlemen, This unique Syrian achievement and the solidarity between our peoples have led us to try to uproot sectarianism and to fight against attempts to divide our country once again. But the Syrian people are aware enough to understand and to resist. We formed commissions for fact-finding and granted access to UN fact-finding missions. I guarantee to bring to justice everyone accountable and responsible for bloodshed. And in this context, Israeli strikes and attacks against my country continue, and Israeli policies contradict the international supporting position for Syria, which threatens new crises and struggles in our region. For this purpose, and in face of this aggression, Syria is committed to dialogue, and we're committed to the disengagement of forces agreement of 1974, and we call on the international community to stand beside us in the face of these attacks. Ladies and gentlemen, from the very moment the former regime fell, we set out a clear strategic policy built upon three pillars: balanced diplomacy, security, stability, and economic development. We filled the power vacuum, called for an inclusive national dialogue, and announced a government of competence. We strengthened the principle of participation and established a national commission for transitional justice and another for the missing, ensuring justice and fairness. We are now proceeding toward electing representatives of the people in the Legislative Council. We restructured civil and military institutions, dissolving all previous formations. Through intensive diplomatic activity, Syria restored its international relations and forged regional and global partnerships and achieved the gradual lifting of most sanctions. And we call now for the complete lifting of sanctions so that they no longer shackle the Syrian people. Investment laws have been amended, and major regional and international companies have already begun entering the Syrian market, contributing through investment and reconstruction. Syria today is rebuilding itself through establishing a new state, building institutions and laws that guarantee the rights of all without exception. A land of ancient civilization and culture deserves to be a state of law, protecting everyone, safeguarding rights, guaranteeing freedoms, and fostering life to flourish while turning the page of a wretched past. We are determined to restore Syria's glory, dignity, and honor. And in continuation of the Syrian story, I declare before you today the triumph of truth over falsehood. Truth has come and falsehood has perished. Syria is reclaiming its rightful place among the nations of the world. This announcement is the echo of a great people's will, a people who forged glory throughout the ages, who rose again from beneath the rubble to restore their rights and freedom and dignity. On behalf of the Syrian people, I extend gratitude to everyone who stood by the Syrian cause, who aided Syrians in their tragedy, and who welcomed them in their countries, and to all nations and peoples who rejoiced in the victory of the Syrian people's will. And I particularly thank Turkey, Qatar, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and all Arab and Islamic states, the United States of America, and the European Union. And before I conclude, let me affirm, the suffering Syria endured, we wish upon no one. We are among the peoples most deeply aware of the horrors of war and destruction. For this reason, we stand firmly with the people of Gaza. For this reason, we stand firmly with the people of Gaza, its children and women, and all peoples facing violations and aggression. We call for an immediate end to the war. In conclusion, the Syrian story has not come to an end. It continues to write a new chapter entitled Peace, Prosperity, and Development. And may the peace of God be upon you.
That was the speech of Syria President Ahmed al-Shara at the United Nations for the 80th General Assembly high-level debate, where he discussed a lot of controversial topics regarding the latest developments in the region. In his address to the UN General Assembly, Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian has accused Israel of committing genocide in Gaza and waging brutal aggression against Iran last June, denouncing Israeli and U.S. strikes as a betrayal of diplomacy. He condemned the targeting of Iranian scientists as violations of international law and decried infringements on Lebanon's sovereignty and efforts to divide Syria. Pezeshkian affirmed Iran's resilience through national unity, stressing Tehran will not surrender to aggression or sanctions and does not seek nuclear weapons. He branded Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu a criminal and warned against bloodshed in the Middle East. In a joint statement following the Trump summit, Arab leaders have called for an immediate end to the war in Gaza, tied to the release of detainees. They stressed the urgent need to ensure sufficient humanitarian aid enters the enclave and firmly rejected any attempts at forcibly displacing Palestinians. The leaders voiced support for reforming the Palestinian Authority and emphasized safeguarding stability in the West Bank and Jerusalem's holy sites. They underlined the importance of a comprehensive Gaza reconstruction plan led by Arab states and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, pledging cooperation with the U.S. to rebuild Palestinian lives. And for more analysis, we now move to Mona Mselhi in our newsroom. To you, Mona.
Thank you so much, Hala. And for further analysis on the situation on the Gaza situation, we are joined from Cairo by the Professor of Political Science at Al-Quds University, Dr. Ayman Al-Raqab. Good evening to you, sir, and welcome to Qnews. Let me here take some of the speeches made by some of the heads of states today, and the recent of which was that of Spain's King Philip VI. King Philip VI openly denounced Israel's actions in Gaza at the UN. What's your take on that?
Good evening. Yes, the world is waking up and seeing everything that Israel is doing to the Palestinians. It has crossed the line of trying to justify what happened on the 7th of October or justify the genocide that everyone is seeing. And we saw that when Netanyahu started his statement, how lots of delegates withdrew. This shows that they are fed up with the lies and the silence when it comes to the genocide. And so I think that today things have turned and they have transformed. What we saw in the 80th meeting of the General Assembly, calling for a two-state solution and reaching a ceasefire and the killing of the Palestinians. And so I think that this is the world moving, that aren't keeping up with this anymore and aren't taking or defending Israel's actions and the USA's actions. And unfortunately, Argentina or Uruguay didn't take a strong stance, but I think that it is time that this has ended.
Right. Spain was one of the countries, or the latest European countries, to recognize Palestine. Now, does this strengthen Europe's collective push and coordinated push for a two-state solution, or risk further divisions among the EU members? No? Do you want me to repeat the question? So
I think that this transformation is greater than its advanced stance on Palestine. And so, yes, Egypt has played a role in convincing the world that what is happening is a crime, with everything that this word means, with all its meaning. And so we need to stop Israel and Israel's operations. And so, yes, this has changed things as we saw in the past days.
Now, by labeling Israel's offensive as a massacre, how does Spain position itself diplomatically compared with other Western powers? The language that he used, particularly on what is going on in Gaza.
It is their political stance is known towards the Palestinians from the very start. As we said, they took a strong stance when it came to arms trade and the Israeli occupation, and so since they had a clear stance, they have been calling for a ceasefire and stopping support to the occupying country. And so over the last period we saw a clear statement from the foreign minister that has said that they need to hold Israel accountable for its crimes. And so, yes, this is according to humanitarian principles of a country that is fed up with Israel's action. And yeah, when as we mentioned, from the start of the war, they have thought about the occupation as a crime, and that we need a strong and unified stance to bring back the rights of the Palestinians. And it is not now about the reactions about what happened on the 7th of October. It has gone beyond that.
Right, that was Dr. Ayman Al-Raqab from Cairo, the professor of political science at Al-Quds University. We thank you so much for joining us here on Qnews. And I guess now we're back to Hala Al-Hamalawi in our studios. To you, Hala.
Thank you so much, Mona. A flotilla carrying aid to Gaza was hit by drones overnight in international waters over Greece, damaging at least 2 boats. Italy has sent a Navy ship to assist. The global Sumud flotilla, with around 50 civilian vessels and activists, including Greta Thunberg, blamed Israel and its allies for the attack involving unidentified drones and communications jamming. Spanish lawmaker Juan Bordera reported witnessing multiple explosions. The United Nations has called for an independent investigation into drone attacks on the Gaza-bound global Sumud flotilla, following reports of sound bombs and possible chemical agents being used. UN Human Rights Office spokesperson Thamin Al-Khitan said that an independent, impartial and thorough investigation is needed, and stressed that those responsible for any violations must be held accountable. As reported earlier, flotilla organizers said that several vessels were targeted overnight in international waters by drones, prompting international concern. Israel's occupation military has claimed that Al-Shifa hospital, once Gaza's largest medical facility, was used by Hamas fighters as a man-terror command center. Gaza's Ministry of Health stated that the hospital continues to operate under harsh conditions with limited but vital services. Since October 2023, Israeli strikes have heavily damaged most medical facilities in Gaza, with Israel citing the fight against terrorism as justification. Israel has closed the King Hussein Bridge crossing, the only direct route between the Israeli-occupied West Bank and Jordan, just days after it was briefly reopened following a deadly shooting that killed 2 Israeli soldiers. An Israeli official said that the closure was ordered by political leadership but gave no further details. The crossing is vital for Palestinians traveling abroad and for commercial trade with Jordan. Moving on, the Israeli occupation army confirmed that 19 people were injured after a drone exploded in the city. That came as Israeli media has reported air raid sirens through sounding in Eilat amid suspected drone infiltration. According to preliminary findings, the Iron Dome defense system failed to intercept the drone despite 2 attempted interceptive launches. Israeli media said that the Air Force has opened an investigation into the failed interception. The Israeli occupation army later stated that the drone, which struck Eilat, had been launched from Yemen, marking a significant escalation and exposing vulnerabilities in Israel's aerial defense against long-range threats from outside its immediate borders. And now we move to a live broadcast from New York, where U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is delivering a press conference.
That enables that cooperation.
In this framework, the GCC countries would like to affirm the crucial role of the U.S. in supporting the security and stability of the Gulf region and the Middle East region as a pillar of an effective strategic relationship and to reinforce regional and international security. We reiterate our condemnation of the Israeli attack on our neighborly Qatar. And this is a violation of international law, which represents a threat to the stability and security of the region, and we reiterate our utmost support of Qatar in its efforts to boost its security, to protect its people and anybody staying on its land. We would like to affirm that the Palestinian problem remains in the forefront of our policy, and our ultimate goal is to reach a comprehensive peace. And in this framework, we demand increased efforts to find a two-state solution in line with international law and to lift all obstacles to the delivery of humanitarian aid to Gaza. As for Iraq, we highly value the efforts of the U.S. to reinforce the UN role in this regard, and we assert the importance of solving all problems with the state of Kuwait. We also highly value the role of the U.S. and the meetings, and we hope that the U.S.-Russian efforts would lead to a solution to the problem in Ukraine, and we would like to use constructive dialogue as a basis for resolving all conflicts. In conclusion, I would like to reiterate the importance of reinforcing our common efforts and collective work so that we can confront existing challenges and to achieve peace and security and comprehensive development in our region. And we hope that our discussion will also identify priorities for our future work in a way that would push for more integration. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to the General Secretary.
I will.
Your Highness, Excellencies, peace be upon you. I'm delighted to address you at this ministerial meeting between the Gulf Cooperation Council and the United States of America. I express my sincere thanks and appreciation to His Excellency Marco Rubio, Secretary of State of the United States, for the warm reception and generous hospitality, and to all participants for their steadfast commitment to strengthening this strategic partnership that spans decades of close cooperation. Your Highness, Excellencies, distinguished guests, in recent days, our region has witnessed a highly sensitive event that endangered its security as Israel carried out a flagrant attack against the state of Qatar, an egregious violation of international law, the Charter of the United Nations, and Qatar's sovereignty and territorial integrity. This attack targeted residential facilities housing members of the Hamas Political Bureau delegation engaged in ongoing negotiations in mediation efforts led by the State of Qatar to reach an agreement on Gaza. This assault resulted in the martyrdom of a security officer, civilian casualties, and endangered the lives of residents in a densely populated neighborhood surrounded by schools, diplomatic missions, and kindergartens. The Council, while reaffirming its full solidarity with the State of Qatar and stressing that the security of the GCC state is indivisible and that any attack on one is an attack on all, strongly condemns this Israeli aggression. Your Highness, Excellencies, the humanitarian tragedy in the Gaza Strip, the continuous aggression against the Palestinian people, the crime of genocide perpetrated by the Israeli occupation forces, and the deliberate blockade that has caused famine in the Strip are developments that will inevitably have grave repercussions, threatening regional and international peace and security. We stress the urgent necessity of reaching a comprehensive and immediate ceasefire in the Gaza Strip, securing the release of hostages and detainees, facilitating the unhindered delivery of humanitarian assistance, and working towards a just and comprehensive settlement that leads to the establishment of an independent Palestinian state on the 1967 borders, with East Jerusalem as its capital, in accordance with the Arab Peace Initiative and relevant international resolutions. In this context, we reaffirm the importance of respecting Syria's sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity, rejecting foreign interference in its internal affairs, and recognizing that Syria's security and stability are fundamental pillars of regional stability. We condemn the repeated Israeli attacks on Syrian territory and stress the necessity of adhering to the 1974 disengagement agreement. On the Lebanese front, we reaffirm GCC's steadfast position to support of Lebanon, its sovereignty, security, and stability, and underline the importance of implementing political and economic reform to achieve the aspirations of its people, stability, prosperity, and development. We also stress the importance of safeguarding maritime security and waterways in the region, and of countering activities that threaten regional and international peace and stability, including attacks on commercial vessels, threats to maritime navigation and international trade. Your Highness and Excellencies, our meeting today comes within the framework of a long-standing strategic partnership built on deep-rooted historical foundations that have grown and developed over past decades, aiming to foster security, stability, and prosperity at both the regional and international levels. This direction has been embodied in 5 joint summits, the latest of which was the Riyadh Summit in 2025 with His Excellency President Trump, which witnessed the signing of trade and investment agreements exceeding $2 trillion. In addition to these summits, foreign ministers have held regular meetings since 2012. Within the framework of the Strategic Cooperation Forum, these meetings resulted in the establishment of 10 joint working groups in fields including air and missile defense, maritime security, counterterrorism, cybersecurity, special forces, economic, trade, and investment cooperation. These meetings have resulted in practical projects to enhance defense and security capacities, protect maritime routes, and counter regional threats. On the economic front, trade exchange between the two sides exceeded $120 billion in 2024, supported by massive Gulf investments in U.S. economy amounting trillions of dollars.
That was a live broadcast from New York, where U.S. Secretary of State meets with the foreign ministers of the Gulf Cooperation Council. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has warned world leaders at the UN General Assembly that the world is facing the most destructive arms race in history, urging immediate action to stop Russia. Ukraine is only the first, Zelensky said, claiming Russian drones and operations are already spreading across Europe. He accused President Vladimir Putin of seeking to expand the war beyond Ukraine. And that brings us to the end of our news bulletin. Here is what we have been covering. Spain's king calls for urgent international action to end the massacre in Gaza. Iran's president denounces the Israeli and U.S. strikes as a betrayal of diplomacy. And the Ukrainian president warns that the world is facing the most destructive arms race in history. And that concludes our news bulletin for the hour. Don't forget to follow Qnews on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at QNewsEG to always stay informed. My name is Hera Al-Hamalawi, and I thank you so much for being with us.